everything should be working, but as always, I'm going to back check it with my own device because we have had some interesting things happening. So hopefully this is working. Can y'all hear us? So, as you know, my name is Brian, and you were at our Flannel Farms family forum, and typically we discuss whatever I want to discuss. We've done some interviews in the past, but I'm very excited. They can hear us. Woohoo! Thank you, Tanya. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Jenny. Sean. Hello, my friend. This is our second inaugural broadcast from our international world headquarters here in the middle of nowhere. And I have a special guest, Dr. Jonathan Kubish. Did I say it right?
Kubesh, but I appreciate it. It's those pesky checks that get you.
So somehow the good doctor and I became acquainted on Facebook. I'm not sure how. We kind of frequent, I think, some of the similar circles when it comes to homesteady, regenerative type things. And as it turns out, well, I won't tell you what he does. Actually, we're gonna let him tell you what he does. But first, I'm very excited. I have a chai Camaro tea. I'm sure I'm mutilating that pronunciation. I just found it. It's mostly vanilla, super good. I'm very excited. I wish you could smell this. It's so good. You have a tea as well, don't you, Doc? What do you got?
I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. We really need to stock up better, but I'm trying out this lavender, orange, gray, just some black tea. I'm trying to figure out the manufacturer. Flying Bird Botanicals. So
Flying Bird Botanicals.
So far, so good. First few sips, steeped pretty quick, but it's a black tea. Partial to greens myself, but
okay.
It is.
I believe a black tea has more caffeine in it than the green tea, so hopefully you're able to sleep tonight. Yeah, it's not. I said chai Camaro.
I got 6-month-old
vanilla
in the next
Camaro.
room, so he's.
You'll be all right. Yeah, Sean, I messed up. Sean said chai Camaro, and it's not. It's a herbal. It's a vanilla Camaro. I don't know. Honey, do you have the box? Can you hand it to me? I'll show you the box. That way I know I'm mutilating this, and it's really good. I'm very excited about it. Right thing. Am I? Mm-hmm. I thought so, but it's made by Harney and Sons. Yeah, Camaro. I said it right. You did. It's too close to the fancy internet lighting. There you go. For those of you that are listening to this podcast, you're going to have to go back to the 3-minute and 7-second mark to find it. Well, yes, Sean says chai means tea. Well, typically it means a black tea, I believe, but don't quote me on that. So I found, like I said, the good doctor. We were looking at our crop garden area where you guys know that we've run the pigs through it. We've had some Austrian field peas there as a cover crop, and me and the lovely Mrs. Flannel were trying to decide if we should put pigs back on it or if we should just cut it down to where it's not going to produce legumes and thus depleting nitrogen, I believe, if we let it go to full harvest. But we didn't really want to roll it under again necessarily. So I remembered that I think the doctor and I have been friends on Facebook for, 6 months, 9 months, something like that. And he's posting all sorts of really cool things that he's doing. And I thought, well, I'll just give him a buzz. So we ended up talking on the phone for, half hour, 45 minutes. And I barely scratched the surface with things. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to stop here. You've given me so much information. We should take this to our people and let them be able to pick your brain. So why don't you tell us another super cool thing is he's also a believer. So anybody that studies God's design for things and the way it works and can appreciate who put the system into place, I think adds an extra layer. I tend to trust that expertise more than people who don't understand where we come from. So, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what your degree is actually in, who you work for, those kind of things. Can you hear me, Doc? We might have lost him. We've had some technical difficulties. Once this is locked up.
I'm kind of getting you in and out. I got like some xylophone noise. I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh. I don't have any
I'm hearing you now,
noise on mine.
and your beautiful chiseled face is giving me wonderful direct eye contact, but you're static on the screen. But I got visually I can't see you. You're frozen, but I'm starting to hear you better.
Okay, maybe I'll.
Oh, and
maybe I'll move
You're good. Sorry.
All right, no, that's okay. Can you hear me now? Let's try this. Maybe I have the microphone too far away.
Okay. So what I've heard so far, we were talking through the flower garden situation.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the people what you do, how you got into it, what your
crystal clear, perfect mid-Atlantic accent. Love it.
We're set. I was too far away. I'm still learning these microphones and stuff. So yeah, tell us about yourself, what your degree's in, where you work, and what you're passionate about. And I think we're having massive lag issues.
Well, my background, my story is born outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. My big passion for agriculture, working with the land, came from going up to the family farm up in Peru, Indiana. I know, really exotic. And, I really stuck with it, just thinking in terms of agriculture, cows, corn, sows, plows, whatever you want to call it. Got a ecology degree at Ohio State. I know better than to say the Ohio State. Did my master's at the University of Tennessee, and did my PhD just most recently at Virginia Tech. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we? Did that come through okay?
Yeah, we're doing great. Keep it up.
It looks better now. Okay, thank you. But I mean, in each one of those experiences, wherever I've been, my big thing has been working with soil, plant, animal. So at Ohio State, we were working to give a native clover a job in the landscape. So endangered species, running buffalo clover. We did some work that helped contribute to it getting delisted off the endangered species list. You don't hear about that a lot. Master's degree, I did organic forage systems. So how do we grow grass for cattle or for hay in a way that maintains soil health, is cost effective, and, just recommendations and strategies for people who aren't going to do big O organic versus little O organic and kind of work those weird spaces. And PhD was bee-friendly beef. We were growing wildflowers in cattle pastures. And we did some really cool stuff about the soil seed bank, and I'm happy to get into that depending on what we want to cover. But the big thing was we were able to improve cattle growth, and we were able to make room for pollinators and layer ecosystem services in space. So if you want to describe what I do, I'm a little bit hippie, and my big job is trying to make that useful on, small, medium, large farms, anything in between. Still working for Virginia Tech. I'll be moving to another land grant starting in April. But yeah, it's something I'm passionate about, something I'm interested in. Part-time, I ranch turkeys and ducks out here at the house in Giles County, Virginia.
That's so cool. The layering of the beef pasture. So, I mean, typically when you think of pasture, at least in my ignorant brain in the past, I was born and raised in the city. So I was not raised on any type of farm. Fort Lauderdale, to be exact, where everything is sand. And so it was not an easy thing, but pasture to me was just grass. And I did not realize what it went into grass or ecosystems. And I read a book on the Dust Bowl and how taking out the native grasses that had roots that were, 100 feet deep and could withstand those arid conditions versus, the stuff they put in really disrupted everything. And the entire ecosystem of the plains was just, it was a complete mind opener to me that it wasn't just grass or a grass or, Timothy hay or whatever. All those things have their place, but that monoculture is really terrible. And you need that vibrancy and the diversity of life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of the big perks of being somebody living in Virginia is you've got Ben Tracy, one of the global experts on biodiversity, ecosystem function, and there's a lot of really good work about figuring out, okay, when we think as home gardeners, homesteaders, small farm, wherever you may be in, we may see advertisements where we need at least 64 species in a cover crop mixture. We may go out into our garden and think that we need to have 1,600 things out there, and we need to have all the different gene pools and this, that, the other. And a lot of that work really comes down to, we get this curve, and I'm sorry, I'm going to try and mirror this, so I got to move my hand over here to get the more user-friendly, but number of species here and then amount of ecosystem function here, we hit this plateau, generally about 6 to 8 species over a unit area. And that seems to satisfy most situations. And those 6 to 8 species don't even have to be things we planted. The weeds count towards that ecosystem function. And what we're really doing as land managers, as stewards of creation, is we're just trying to optimize that ecosystem function, optimize those processes, feed the microbes, protect soil structure, etc. And I think it's really important to be able to understand those dials and levers in order for us to be more effective when we talk about trying to improve some of those processes, like trying to get more carbon into the soil, trying to prevent soil erosion. And really, for me, as a plants guy, I see my whole thing is I interact through the plants, the soil. They're my middlemen, and my job is to send the right middlemen, get the right deal to get the right process accomplished. Otherwise, we're talking about an extractive process. I put my plant out there to soak up this nutrient, and I haul it off and I put it over here. I think something I'm personally passionate about, one of these big things we talk about when we hear regenerative agriculture, et cetera, is we have to be aware of the law of conservation of mass consistent. So unless we're putting something in or unless we're bringing something back, mass is moving around in our system, and we need to figure out how to return that in the best and efficient way. But yeah,
having animals on it is beneficial, but like you said, it's the conservation.
I just want to say, I saw a cover crop as dead nettle. If I don't feel that spiritually, what a crop.
Yeah, Tanya says weeds are plants too, and they are, they absolutely are, and they have their place. And but you're right, it's the way things have been done, kind of in modernity, it seems, here in the past 50 to 70 years, is instead of using nature to replenish the soil because of, like you said, the law of conservation. So if you're raising a crop, you're taking nutrients out of the soil, it goes into the crop, you take the crop, you haul it off. Well, you have to put something back. And we have discovered, if you will, in modernity, that it's easier to just go get a truckload of nitrogen or a truckload of lime or a truckload of whatever and just chuck it out there so that you can pull that out the next year. And that's no ecosystem at all. That's just, you're using the land, but it's not, there are better ways to do it, at least on a small scale. I'm sure big agriculture it's an extremely difficult thing and a whole different animal. But on a small scale with family farms or a few acres of something, I think it's a much more attainable goal. And probably once you get the systems in place, I would imagine cheaper too.
Absolutely. And, being a grass guy and leaning towards, forage livestock systems, when we talk about setting the bar for trying to improve soil health, trying to improve some of these nutrient cycling systems, a cow-calf pair in rural Virginia is surprisingly one of the most sustainable systems. We only export a handful of nutrients, and that goes out in that little calf on the way out, but 85 to 90% of our nutrients stay on the farm, stay in that closed loop. And, that's just something powerful. Like, that's your gold standard in every other system that we do. We need to be aware that we're moving that around. I think it is easier on smaller acreage because the folks who are on smaller acres are more liable to be diversified. So this isn't just my corn ground. I'm going to have my livestock here next season, or I'm going to bring this in from my woodlot. My trees are bringing in free organic matter because they're sequestering carbon. I grind them up. I put them into as wood chips between my flower beds. There's just a lot of really common sense things that people are already doing. And that's something I'm personally partial to. I work with a lot of ecologists. I work with a lot of, in-town big city scientists, and they don't always see some of those small actions that people are already doing that are showcasing exactly what they say. When you say carbon sequestration, I'm thinking wood chips from a woodlot getting applied in a garden, or somebody using a compost pile, just closing really small, simple loops, many little hammers, boom. But I don't mean to be too far off. I know we've got interest to get into the weeds, into soil, really wherever you want me to be as best I can be.
No, I think you're hitting it. It's all part of the whole process. And I think we have to have the big picture view, which even all the way down to the microbes is what are we trying to accomplish with these things that we're doing? We did have two questions for you. One is from Carolyn, who asked, where are you moving in April? And KP1 asked, what about us that just have raised beds? Is it just as important to cover crop like here in the summer in Florida?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're talking about raised beds, summer in Florida, because y'all basically have a spring and a fall season. I guess you're a little bit different than us because you do get a little bit of winter down yonder. For me, it makes no difference if it's a raised bed or if it's in ground soil. It might be a little bit different if you did bring in like a potting mix, a peat-based mix is going to behave a little bit differently than a mineral soil. Those of you who might be up maybe in Minnesota, and there's a few spots like in the Midwest, you might be dealing with an organic soil. Same thing as peat moss. You've got this stuff that's breaking down. It's a compost pit with poor drainage a lot of times on those muck soils. But let's shift back to Florida. Let's stay on topic. I think it's the same thing. We want to make sure that we're making regular inputs in terms of organic matter. If we can return crop residue, so like I grow tomatoes, I try to make sure that as much of my kitchen waste, as much of that material or debris that was growing out there, in Florida, you've got a disease risk. So you're going to compost that away from the raised bed, put it back on. Once it's clean, you let it get up to temperature, cook off your pathogens, put it back on. That's the way to avoid building disease pressure, but also making sure you close that loop. In terms of a cover crop in Florida, shucks, I would have to check with some folks. University of Florida has a great forage team, and they've got a great hort team that might have some better local suggestions, but would agree. Anytime that you're taking time off from your garden, if you don't have it covered with a mulch, or if you don't have it covered with a green manure, cover crop, whatever you want to call it, naked soil, no good. I try to, in my garden here in Virginia, have the soil exposed maybe 2 or 3 weeks as I'm preparing ground. Otherwise, I want it smothered. I want it covered. I want something on it. Would agree. Let's see here. Leaves and Pine Straw are my mulch buddies. Compost Everything, wonderful book. Yes, I do agree that a hippie wrote it, but yeah, I mean, whatever makes sense, whatever's local, making sure you have a healthy balance. I think a big thing maybe might give me some flack with some of y'all is wood chips, nitrogen immobilization. So when we compost, we talk about greens and browns. One of the brownest, most carbon rich things you have is wood chips. If you put down a lot of wood chips in your garden, you might get some nitrogen immobilization, those top few inches of soil. Uh, if we were going to turn back the clock to 60s, I say just get a bag of urea, salt those suckers down, and we'll get that balance just right. But since we're trying to make a difference and we're trying to do this better, I mean, my suggestion would be use wood chips sparingly in the garden, or something I found that works pretty well is put down a layer of recycling paper or straw, something that's a little less brown carbon rich, then put your wood chips on tops. That way you get the best of both worlds in terms of moisture retention, balancing your C to N. All right.
So here in Virginia, I mean, one of the
that's how I got nematodes, referring to chopping and dropping. So I guess we were talking about composting residue in Florida. I mean, I think this is one of those big things when we talk about composting or trying to, return residue back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the lag is bad. But I was going to, gosh, I don't even know now what the. Oh, Carolyn wants to know if you realized my brother was the one that wrote Compost Everything. Anyways, my brother wrote Compost Everything. No, the chopping and dropping is something that he talks about in his book, where instead of, trying to pull it out and remove it, you just cut it and let it lay where it's at. But here in Virginia, and probably anywhere, one of the things that we were discussing before when it comes to my daughter's flower garden was soil testing. So talk to us about soil testing. How I know it's state specific, but tell us how we can do it here in Virginia and potentially in other states, and why that's so important moving forward, even if you're a knowledgeable gardener or you have a pretty good understanding of how things work and stuff. Why would that be really a key clutch thing to do?
All right. So, the cool kitschy thing you might hear from your local extension agent is don't guess, soil test. And the key thing that we're trying to address there is we want to make a responsible use of nutrients, whether we're going to go and buy fertility in a bag or whether we're going to get it in terms of manure, compost, etc. The cool thing is if you get a soil test, we can get most of your nutrients. Most states test for phosphorus, potassium, most of your micronutrients to identify what's sufficient, what's insufficient, and they might give you some recommendations on what to add. The cool thing with that is if we have the relative nutrient content of your compost, your manure, etc., we can do some very simple algebra to calculate your soil test results to figure out how much of a compost or a manure you would need, rather than having to go and say, hey, I need a 13, this many pounds. We could say, I need this many tons of compost, given that I have these results. Soil tests, I appreciate you saying that it is very state specific, but they vary a little bit state to state. Here in Virginia, we've got a standard soil testing lab here at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. What you do is you go out, ideally you would use a soil probe, and you can ask your county extension office to get a probe. That just gets you a more accurate measurement. If you only have like a trowel or something, you go out, you take a sample. For pastures, we go to 2 to 4 inches deep. If you're looking at a flower bed, vegetable crop field, we're going more like 6 inches deep. And we just cut a few samples. We try to get about 1 an acre on farm fields, but we're really trying to represent the whole area that we're going to be working with. So we try to get 20 to 30, we call them cores. We mix that sample together. and we put it in a cute little box, and we ship that into state soil testing. Or you go to your county agent, they'll box it up and they'll help submit. That comes to a soil testing lab. They're usually a wonderful team tests for your mineral nutrients, as well as most of the time we offer an organic matter test. The cool thing about this, for those of you who are really interested in carbon sequestration, et cetera, is that you can do a really simple conversion to say how much soil organic carbon you have just based on how much carbon's in the average organic matter molecule. And I think it's like a 0.5 multiplier. So about half of that organic matter value is your soil organic carbon. Please don't hold me to that. I'll have to double check. But we can track all of these things, and we can together on the back end and say, okay, here's our point in time. Cool thing about a soil test is it's usually good for 2 to 3 years, as long as you're doing the same thing. So you can measure your growth over time. So let's say we want to increase soil fertility. We want more organic matter in our soil. Organic matter is a great thing. And you can say, okay, 2021, I come back in 2024, I increase my soil organic matter 1%. That's a big deal in organic matter to get a percentage point. Would highly recommend doing that kind of benchmarking. And, the other thing is, if you're going to change crops, you take another soil test. And instead of saying, okay, pretend that I mined my entire soil for all of its nutrition, I have this test to say, we just need to tweak a few things and we're good to go. But most of the time, soil test is going to tell you better than what your eyes can. For those of you who work on indicator plants, my rule of thumb is any indicator plant indicates a need for a soil test. Something we deal with in Virginia in gardens, new home sites. Let's say you clear out some woods. You see a lot of broom sedge, broom straw. I'm trying to think. They've got a cuter name for it out in Kentucky, Tennessee, far west. It's got a more ornamental name, but it's a wonderful native plant. The problem is it generally indicates some kind of poor fertility situation. And University of Kentucky's done a lot of great work, and they found out that this plant can mean you have low potassium, low phosphorus, low soil pH. It could mean 6 or 7 different things in 6 or 7 different places. So what it tells me is, I see broom sedge, I'm going to go pull a soil test. And the cool thing in Virginia is, thanks to a lot of work trying to maintain the Chesapeake Bay, soil tests are free for commercial farms. So if you've got a few acres and you might sell a few dozen chicken eggs, or you might have like a market garden, you are eligible to submit a sample for free. And all you have to do is pay about $4 for that organic matter test. Other states generally pay about $20 to $30. But again, $20 to $30 that lasts 2 to 3 years. And when you're buying compost by the ton, when you're pricing out, trying to have to go out and spread stuff, it makes sense to me.
Absolutely. And, we talk to people all the time, and they say, well, I'm no good at growing things. My brother's phrase is, may your thumbs always be green. I have a black thumb. I kill things. Well, what you end up finding out is they're either growing stuff that is not really meant for their zone, or they have no idea what's in their soil. And between those two things, it's nearly impossible, if you don't have good soil and you're not growing the right thing, to have a successful garden. So finding out what you should grow in your area is pretty easy. I mean, that's a pretty quick internet search to what grows in this zone in my region. You can ask people around you, hey, what are you successful growing? And they'll be happy to tell you. You can't really Google, what is my soil like? I mean, they will give you a general idea. You have this type of clay mixture type thing, but you really don't get any idea of the nutrient, profile or the organic matter profile. And you will have so much more success if you actually have targeted the nutrients that you need for what you want to grow, right?
Exactly. And you really bring up a good point with trying to figure out what a web search says your soil is going to be. The Web Soil Survey from the Natural Resource Conservation Service is a pretty good starting point. Let's say you're moving out to the country the first time, you're trying to figure out, is my house going to work? Is my septic going to work? And it'll give you some general good, bad, ugly levels. The big problem is for most of the country, that mapping is not fine scale enough for anybody who's going under an acre or so. So I pulled up a soil map where it said that I was on 100% of Wrightsville silt loam, and I went out and I stood on it, and I was standing in a bathtub of rock hard clay. So, you really have to get out there and do a fair bit of ground truthing wherever you want to do. And I was just mentioning soil fertility, but for those of you who are interested in trying to figure out texture or trying to figure out some other things that might shape your direction, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, do we want to know if it's a clay loam versus a sandy loam? What's our suitability? I mean, my biggest thing is I work on a wonderful clay loam here. I think it's a Braddock behind my house. I grow my whole garden on one soil series. Really easy, simplifies my management. The real challenge is my clay loam against my Irish potatoes. I get a whole bunch of really nice fingerling potatoes rather than a nice healthy spud, because I'm pushing the soil a little bit further than what I've been able to give it over 3 years. So as a gardener, maybe small time farmer, gentleman farmer, you might be looking at trying to work around your soil, or you might be trying to work and say, be honest with yourself and set realistic limits.
Yeah, I think you'll be so much happier in the end if you do that kind of thing, and it makes it so much easier when you have that success too. And it's encouraging when your gardens actually grow and produce, even if it's not necessarily the thing you really wanted to grow, but being successful growing something is just that much more satisfying to get big, healthy crops of something than it is to get, fingerlings of something. We've had a devil of a time with potatoes here. They've been the same way, very, very fingerly. And then we discovered a potato beetle infestation here that we didn't have until we planted potatoes. So yeah, it's a trick. So let's talk about animals and the rotation, if you will. People have chickens, backyard chickens. It's a pretty popular thing. How beneficial are backyard chickens to somebody's garden and running them around, and how much space, let's say a flock of 5, maybe 10 backyard chickens in maybe a quarter of an acre size, standard kind of suburban lot, how much benefit would that be to their property? Is that enough space for them to have those types of things? And let's just say it's in like a chicken tractor type thing so they can move it around. It's just not all willy-nilly. Would that be a useful thing to have, or would that be more headache than it's worth in terms of regenerating soil?
All right. So 5 to 10 chickens, quarter acre. I've got you right. And we have control. They're not loosey-goosey. All right. So, I mean, the cool thing is when you work for Virginia Tech, we got a lot of literature on pastured poultry from the 50s, 60s, 70s, back when that was the most cost-effective way to do that. In terms of 5 to 10 chickens on a quarter acre, we're running about 1/10 of what we could on a full acre. So on a quarter acre, assuming that you were production model, and this is not a confined animal feeding operation. This is something that could handle the amount of chickens running over it. We would have recommended that you raise 300 to 400 an acre. So in this case, 30 to 40 on that quarter acre lot. So, you could definitely bring more birds on and treat it like a fertility program. So your feed, which brings in those nutrients, goes through the bird. You get eggs, you get layers, you get prayers, and then the yard gets the fertility deposited out the back end. And by all means, I'm absolutely a fan of trying to control where the birds go. Maybe it's the graduate student research scientist in me, but also it's just a pattern of trying to balance the needs of soil, plant, and animal over space. So one of the big draws of why we keep birds outside is we want them to eat a little bit of the pasture. They're really out there going after bugs. If they are getting any rock or mineral in their diet from the soil, um, that's great too. But we've got to spread that effect in space and in time in order to make that really work out well. But I would absolutely see it as it's better to plan out a rotation, move animals around. And even if they come back to the same spot, maybe once or twice in a season, that's much better than just having, here's my mud chicken lot that turns into a clay hard pan, smells awful. And, that's one of the original reasons why people started trying to prohibit having chickens in town was, we had a really lackluster management program. So I'm a big fan of a tractor. I have turkeys and ducks in the back, and I originally built just a big rectangular turkey tractor, and I used to drag that around. I now use the electric net around it, just something that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, I would say, by all means, any animal that we can move around in space and time, it's better than any kind of stationary system. Even if we're moving every other. I wouldn't say that legally you could keep 30 to 40 chickens on that quarter-acre lot. You probably have some zoning restrictions, but from what the grass, what the insect population could support, we're looking at 30 or so. I know that's an awful lot.
That's a lot of chickens. And actually, I think I'm going to have to increase the amount I have. I think we have 40 or so completely free ranged. We have a mobile coop out there that has an automatic door that we can set for sunrise and sunset. So they go to bed in the coop. Some of them are in the trees, but we've had them romping around for a while. And then we have 10 birds sequestered for the house that are our egg production birds. They all produce eggs, but I never exactly know where the free range birds are going to lay them. So it makes it a bit trickier. So the house birds are contained because I know where their eggs are going to be on a given basis. But I think I might have to triple or even quadruple the size of my flock out there. And we haven't fed the ones that are out there at all. They're just, free ranging grass, bugs, dirt, grit, and they are depositing all over the place. And they've been picking through the cow poop and, getting rid of parasites and those kind of things. So I definitely think I'm going to have to increase that number just based on the numbers you just gave us. So, but yeah, we were talking about our flower garden area, and we have planted some crops and things in that area. We have a cover crop on it now. We are packaging up our soil test this week to send out to you, but you were telling us about a clover that would help us on the quick. And I know I was under the impression, and I still am, I know that soil regeneration takes time. And the longer, you can work it, the longer you can reinvest back into your soil, of course, the better it is. But there are some quick fixes, that are I don't know, stopgap measures is the right term, but some kind of like boost we could give it naturally to help us for the next season of our flowers. Can you tell us some of the things we can do short term, and then what some of the longer term things might look like?
Well, sure thing. So we talked in terms of the short term. I think we were recommending crimson clover for something that was going to go into production around Mother's Day. And I think we talked about that. That would be 2 or 3 weeks ago. So crimson clover, we generally talk about it as a winter annual in this part of Virginia, and over in your part of, I guess just in this general region. Winter annual, it's something we use in the off season. And our plan would be get it down now, give it about 90 days, and then terminate that, go into your flowers. In terms of the longer term, something that we recommend here is we talk about frost seeding red and white clover. So red clover, it's what you see in the roadside ditch in Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia. Same as white clover. You might see it on playgrounds or in your lawn. The color of the flower is the name of the plant. And I was going to recommend frost seeding red and white clover for something that would keep the ground in place for 2 to 3 years, build up a little bit of nitrogen, enrich the spot, get it ready for going into not this season, but in 2025, in 2026. And I mentioned frost seeding. The cool thing about this time of year in the mid-Atlantic, in the upper South, is that we have freeze-thaw action in the soil. So you can throw these small hard seeds on the ground, and that freeze-thaw action brings them down and puts them at about the right depth to get germinated as we come into March and April. And so it's a really low input, low management way of getting seed into the ground. We don't have to cultipack. We don't have to harrow it in. We just throw and grow. And it's not often that we get something that's so low input in our system. And the other thing about these clovers is that we've got stuff that's really nutritious for our hogs, for our chickens. They're really good at bringing in insects. So for those of you who are thinking about trying to do pollinators, if you were a hunter, you'd call this a bugging plot. But it's an area that you draw birds, turkeys, etc. into, and they just come and they clean it for the insects and for all the crude protein that's present in those clover leaflets. So it's a real good workhorse mixture.
Yeah, that's awesome because we're always looking for dual purpose things on our end. So something that will return, nutrients to the soil, but then something that we can also feed our animals or put them on it, almost like a feedlot, but put them on it for a brief period of time, let them do that work for us and, terminate it. Like you said, terminating doesn't necessarily mean that you have to till it or roll it over. Sometimes you can just, I believe you can, some plants just drag a heavy weight over. I have a concrete roller on the back that I can hook up to my tractor, and just crushing the plant is enough. Of course, that packs your soil, so it's not the best. But putting the animals on it, we have moved our pigs back and forth on these things. Somebody did ask how long chicken manure needs to sit before you can use it. And I know it's considered a hot compost, but a lot of that depends on the concentration levels of how much you're using in a space. Is that right?
Yeah, would agree. It depends on concentration. If you let your birds out of your coop, they wander over the garden and they make one deposit. Probably not the end of the world, but I mean, if we're shoveling out a coop litter, we want to compost that separate from the garden for at least 6 months, both for your health as well as just to make sure that the nitrogen is secured in a more organic form. So we're not getting lost to the atmosphere. We're not getting it locked up in microbes. We want to get it in the right form so that way your plants can use it. So it's better to run it through a compost pile and then put it back on if you're shoveling a coop. My big thing, if you don't want to have to do shoveling, and I'm lazy, my birds don't have a true coop, is try and get your deposits made about 2 months before you're going to come in and plant. And that should balance out the nitrogen getting converted to the right forms, as well as trying to just get it distributed. Something that I'm a sucker for, and right before we went on this live stream, was actually doing a little bit of myself, is I do a fair bit of manure math for what I work on. And so there's some really good book values for how much a bird, a pig, a cow deposits in a year. And, these are guidelines. This isn't perfect math, but you can make some really simple equations to say, I need this many birds to make this much manure for so many days before I go into plant. You can build a whole system around how much poop I want per square foot. I can't control how much carbon dioxide's in my atmosphere right over my plant. I can control where the plant is. I can't control what the soil microbes are feeling like today. but I can feed them the right deposits. I can't make the bird poop in a specific spot, but I sure can guide him or her to park in the right general area. Um, it's very much checkers, not chess here, folks.
Which is hugely beneficial, because I think a lot of this sounds, I personally, it sounds daunting in some ways with, okay, I've, these different plants that I need to do. I have to do these tests, and, there's a math involved with the algebraic equations to figure out what my P's and K's and all this stuff and how many poops per, square inch and stuff. But I think like almost anything that you do, especially with a system, once you get going with it, once you realize the benefit of it and you start to get the systems in place, the starting of a system, an object at rest stays in rest, an object in motion stays in motion. It gets easier as you go, and it starts to become second nature for anybody who's ever done, meal prepping before, or trying to weigh out their macros and, for health benefits, when you start to think planning every single meal and where does every calorie come from and how many grams of protein versus healthy fats versus, well, where do I get this healthy fat? If you try and do the entire thing all at once, it can really just be crazy and overwhelming. So I think starting with that soil test and going, okay, I need this, this, and this, and I can solve that with this, this, and this. Okay, start there, get that in the ground, get it rolling, and then you can implement these other systems as you go. We have birds. Okay, maybe I need to concentrate my birds a little bit more come fall and, winter time over where I want to garden, let them go through there. And then January, February, I'll pull them off, and then I can start planting 2 or 3 months later, and everything will be great, and just move them somewhere else. They don't have to be, I think one of the things we get caught up in is being perfectly productive all the time. And it doesn't. You can put your chickens in the area you need them, and then if you have enough space, you can just go put them somewhere else, and they'll be good for that area too. But you don't even have to worry about planting over there. I mean, my chickens run through my woods all the time. I'm not planting in my woods, but they're not hurting anything. They're eating ticks. It's fine. But when I need my little manure factories, I can pull them back and put them where I need it. So getting started with it, I think, is the most important thing. And then as it'll be less daunting as you go, and you'll find, I think it's probably quite enjoyable once it's clicking that you can go out and do these certain tasks and see the reward and the benefit of it without having to put all that thought into it anymore. You'll know how long the chickens need to be there. You'll know which crops to plant. You'll have the seeds ready to go for that time. And it's not as daunting, I think, as it can be, because I mean, you're clearly a very smart man, and you're talking, there's so many layers to this. You can get real deep into this. I mean, doctorate level stuff, or you can plant some cover crops and still see the benefit with the right information at your fingertips.
I would absolutely agree. I think the big thing that, if you're not going to hear anything else I say tonight, but something I really want to convey, is that you have wonderful extension agents, county support. And if there's something where you need to get that far and I need to know exactly how many pounds of nitrogen I'm putting down through chicken deposits, there is somebody sitting at a county office who would be happy to compute that math with me, talk through my next steps, and make that sort of situation. The biggest thing, and one of our greatest things about living in the United States, is that we have this land grant system where all 50 states have an institution that in theory should be doing research, teaching college kids, and extension. And I lean towards extension because I had positive experiences as a kid working with somebody who said, here's all of this stuff that's way down or way above your understanding, either direction. Let me break it down for you, and here's what you do. There's a great article, I think it was also from Kentucky, and they said, we make rotational grazing too hard. We put all this math in it. We tell them to set up all this infrastructure. And really, the biggest benefits that you get when you're trying to build these kind of systems where you're cycling nutrients, where you're trying to make sure that your family's eating clean and healthy, et cetera, it's in those first few steps. It's those toddler steps that get you the most ground. So if I know what my soil fertility looks like, then I know how to manage it. If I know that bird poop has value in my system, or birds can deal with a pest issue, I've brought livestock in, that's the biggest boost to my soil health. If I have those really interesting conversations where I need to figure out how many animals can my little farm, my home, my homestead, how many animals I can put on this unit of land, then that really sets the tone for saying, okay, what can I do here? And that really, that gives you the chances to say, okay, I need to grow 18 different vegetable crops for my local market or for my pantry or for my larder, whatever you go for. I do a little bit of everything. But making those first small steps is really where you get your mileage. And if you want to go above and beyond, please do. That's where the fun begins.
Carolyn asked if sheep have hot or cold manure. They're thinking of getting some sheep when they move to Georgia.
I would have to double check that. I do not know that offhand. I really feel bad. I should know more about small ruminant. According to University of California, yes, sheep have hot manure that'll need to be composted prior to planting. And I guess that makes sense a little bit. Sheep do carry some pathogens just for themselves. We generally compost. The general rule of thumb that I've used is hot manure, something that's got a lot of nitrogen, or it's got something that will get us sick. Cold manure, something that's a lower risk of us getting sick from it. Though again, always be mindful when handling stored manure and composting. Unless it's going straight from the animal onto the ground, we want to be really mindful of what we're doing with it. And I say that as I'm manure blind myself.
They also wanted to know, is there a best cold manure they could use while they're waiting for their hot manure to finish being hot, waiting for it to cool off?
All right. My personal preference for that has always been cow manure. Just given my geography, it's easy to source. If you're dealing with somebody who does something with like a show heifer or somebody who's got some kind of performance enterprise where they bring them in the barn, you generally get something where they've accumulated like a winter pack. So it's mixed with straw. It's already composted for you. And they're generally happy to cut you a deal where you're just paying the shipping or delivery of that compost to you. And if you're picking it up, it might even be free. I'm extremely partial to cow manure myself. I also think it's your best bang for buck in terms of organic matter out of all your manures.
Oh, it's a double whammy. That's good. All right. We are getting close to our time. And if you guys have any final questions for the good doctor, you said you had some links for us too, I believe, that you wanted to share potentially in the chat here, and then we'll tag some to the comments below. Some of it, I think, was extension information and soil testing information, things like that.
Yes, I am going to tag the Virginia Tech Soil Testing Labs forms and fees. This is how to take a soil test. Here's how to submit it. I'm going to make a note for free tests for commercial. And mind you, when I say commercial, you have some kind of product that you produce. Free test for commercial farms, that's the form you use. If you have any challenges, let me know. When it comes to if you're doing a garden or something a little bit smaller enterprise, those are submitted with a different form. But generally, you look up your local. You look up your local land grant university. It's generally your state school, and they'll give you a specific recommendation. And that failed to post, so let me do a take two. And yes, you are bringing up a great point about the aminopyralids. A big thing that you do want to be mindful for with any manure source, and I've seen these used on horse pasture, cattle pasture. I actually did some source horse manure for a research project on a field that had never been sprayed with Grazon. Was trying to be mindful of aminopyralids. You generally see them under Grazon Next. The newest formulation that's coming out is Proclova, and it's an herbicide where the farmer keeps their clover but sprays out their weeds. The problem is it's persistent in the forage, which goes through the animal, comes back out. So if you've got manure from anything that's eaten from a Grazon pasture, you will get you're going to get an herbicide carryover issue. But do be mindful. Ask around. Most of the time, folks aren't spraying Grazon. That's more of a high performance kind of farm. So if you've got a neighbor who might have like 5 to 10 acres, that's the person you want to zero in on. That's the guy you want to talk to and say, hey, you didn't spray nothing. Let's work out a deal. Yeah. And I really do appreciate this chance to come out and talk to y'all. Again, soil is really the foundation of all this. And if you can integrate your plant and your animal components together, I mean, you're just building up a really resilient system. You're able to build something that can really meet a lot of needs, scratch a lot of itches. And like I've been doing in the world of the ivory tower, you can do in the real world, trying to layer ecosystem services and make the world a better place.
Absolutely. And so you're not a YouTubist like many of my other people, but where can people find you? Maybe find some information, get a hold of you if that's something you want to share. If you don't, I understand, that's fine too. But I believe it said you were a digital content creator also. So I know it's you're trying to get your name out there, I believe, too, in some form or fashion.
I just saw the recommendation about trying to grow beans in a compost sample. I hadn't thought about trying that, but yeah, beans are pretty sensitive. I used to do seed testing in college, and we would soak some of our soybean samples. Oh, I'm sorry. It all kind of ran together. I don't generally YouTube. I got some shorts of working on my little tractor up on my Ja Kubesh account. But you Google my name, Jonathan Kubesh. It's like Tigger. I'm the only one. You can find me through Virginia Tech School of Plant and Environmental Science. My username on the YouTube is my email address if you have questions, comments, concerns. And then I Facebook a little bit, so I'm not going to say no to a Facebook friend request. It's pretty much a public facing profile for me. But no, I'm happy if I can't link with you here. Happy to get in touch, and if there's a situation, happy to talk through it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the links don't seem to be working in the chat. So what we're going to do is when this video is over, he's going to make a comment under the video. As you guys know, which is different from the live chat. Sometimes it takes YouTube 24 hours to process these things. So if you don't see it right away, don't panic. But we're going to pin those things that he's going to send. And most of this does pertain to Virginia, but the general concept applies. So you can find your local ag and office, find out how to get soil samples to them. It shouldn't take you a little bit more than some Googling to find your state specific stuff. There are private companies out there. I know some of you had mentioned some of the things that you were doing privately in the chat. There are private companies that will do soil samples for you that may do different tests for things, but I think you'll get everything you need from your local extension office and from your universities. And like he said, all 50 states have them. So it's something that's available to all of us. Doc, you got any closing comments for us before we sign off?
Great to be on, and don't guess, soil test.
I love it. All right, guys, appreciate y'all spending your Sunday evening with us. Keep growing as you grow. And we'll see you next time. I'm not sure if we're going to have one next week. We do have a video coming out on Tuesday with our newer format. If all goes well, it's still editing. We're switching to that 1 a week style, a little bit longer, a little bit more heavy editing, a little bit more content rich as opposed to the 2 shorter ones a week. So we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday and potentially next week. But God bless you this week. Thanks, Doc. We appreciate it. Y'all have a great night.